I never thought I'd see my only son collapse to the floor on what should have been the happiest day of his life. The look in his eyes that morning wasn't just heartbreak. It was the kind of pain that carves a man open and leaves nothing behind. And the cruelest part, I was standing right there, helpless, watching it all unravel. What I discovered inside my own home that day changed everything I believed about love, loyalty, and family. Stay with me, and please support this channel. I am 54 years old, and if you asked me a year ago what defined me, I would have said two things: my family and the small construction company I built from scratch. My name is Richard Thompson, but to my son, I've always just been dad, and for more than 2 decades, that was the most important job I ever had. That morning, I woke up earlier than usual. It wasn't the alarm that pulled me from sleep, but a strange restlessness in my chest. I glanced at the clock. 5 in the morning. Outside, the world was still dark, the sky a deep navy blue, with only the faintest hint of dawn on the horizon. Normally, I would have rolled over, trying to steal another hour of rest before facing the day. But not that morning. My body felt too tight, too wound up, as if it already knew something was coming before my mind could put it into words. I padded downstairs, careful not to wake Emily, my wife of 26 years. The hardwood floor creaked under my bare feet, each sound exaggerated in the heavy silence of the house. In the kitchen, I brewed myself a pot of coffee, the rich smell filling the air. I poured it into my old, chipped mug, the one my son Daniel had painted for me in grade school. The letters spelling "World's Best Dad" were faded now, but I never stopped using it. Holding that mug always reminded me of why I worked so hard all these years. Daniel was 24, a good kid with a heart as wide as the open sky. He wasn't perfect, but I never needed him to be. What mattered was that he was kind, that he carried a quiet steadiness inside him that reminded me of my own father. He was supposed to be married that day, and I told myself my nerves were only because of the wedding. After all, how many times does a father watch his only son stand at the altar? But deep down, I knew it wasn't just wedding jitters. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the steam rising from my coffee. My mind drifted to Daniel's fiancée, Claire. She was beautiful, ambitious, and came from a family far wealthier than ours. To outsiders, she looked like the perfect match, graceful, sharp, the kind of woman who seemed destined for a polished, picture-perfect life. But I'd seen flickers of something else in her, something restless, something cold. It was in the way her eyes sometimes glazed over when Daniel spoke about his dreams of becoming a teacher. He had left behind a corporate job to chase his passion, and while I respected his courage, I wasn't sure Claire did. She nodded in all the right places, smiled politely, but I could tell she wasn't really listening. She seemed more interested in the financial security his future could bring than in Daniel himself. I brushed the thought aside that morning, the same way I had brushed it aside every other time. My wife Emily adored her, and Daniel loved her. Who was I to question what made him happy? Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about Claire didn't add up. As the sky outside lightened to a pale grey, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Daniel appeared in the doorway, his hair a mess, wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept at all. "Morning, Dad," he said, his voice low and heavy. "Morning, son." I tried to keep my tone light. "Big day, huh?" He pulled out a chair and sat across from me. His hands cradled a mug, but he didn't drink from it. He just stared at the table for a long moment before finally looking up at me. His eyes were red-rimmed, as though he had been holding back tears. "Dad," he said slowly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Anything." "And do you think Claire really loves me?" The question hit me like a hammer to the chest. Of all the things I expected to hear from my son on his wedding day, that was not it. "Why would you say that?" I asked carefully, though inside I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. He hesitated. "I don't know. Lately, it feels like she's looking right through me, like I'm not enough. And then there's the way she talks to Mom, the way she spends time with her. It's just weird." He stopped abruptly, chewing on his lip. "With your mother?" I repeated, frowning. Daniel shook his head quickly. Forget I said that. I'm probably just nervous. Cold feet, right? He tried to laugh, but the sound came out broken, hollow. I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the table. Daniel, nerves are normal. But if something's eating at you this badly, it's not just cold feet. You've got to trust your gut. He nodded slowly, but I could see in his eyes that he was holding something back. Something he wasn't ready to say out loud. Before I could press him, footsteps sounded on the stairs again. Emily walked into the kitchen, already dressed for the day, her blonde hair neatly pulled back. At 51, she carried herself with the same grace she had when we first met in college. She smiled at us both, but her eyes flickered strangely when they landed on Daniel. "Everything okay in here?" she asked lightly, as if nothing at all was out of place. "Yeah, Mum," Daniel muttered. "Just talking to Dad." Emily leaned down and kissed the top of his head, then crossed to the counter to pour herself a cup of coffee. I watched the way she moved, too casual, too controlled. And just for a moment, I saw the faintest tension in her shoulders, the slightest stiffness in her smile. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, but it lodged itself in my mind like a thorn. The three of us sat in silence for a few minutes, sipping coffee, the weight of unspoken words thick in the air. Finally, Daniel pushed back his chair. "I'm going to take a walk," he said quietly. "Clear my head before everything starts." He left without another word, the front door clicking shut behind him. Emily watched him go, her face unreadable. Then she turned to me. "Don't let him get worked up, Richard. It's his wedding day. He just needs to focus on being happy." End quote. I nodded, though unease churned in my chest. Right, happy. But as I watched her retreat back upstairs, something in me stirred a suspicion I couldn't quite name, a whisper of doubt that refused to be silenced. That morning, I thought I was simply nervous for my son's wedding. I had no idea I was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to watch the ground crumble beneath everything I thought I knew. I tried to push the conversation with Daniel out of my mind as the morning went on, but it clung to me like the bitter aftertaste of burnt coffee. A son shouldn't have to question whether the woman waiting at the end of the aisle truly loved him, and yet the way he asked, the raw uncertainty in his voice, told me it wasn't just a fleeting doubt. Something deeper was gnawing at him. I spent the next hour wandering aimlessly through the house. The caterers would be arriving soon, the florist was due with the final arrangements, and relatives would start trickling in by noon. But I couldn't focus on logistics. Every corner of the house reminded me of the life I had built here, the scuffed baseboards from Daniel's toy cars when he was little, the faint outline of a water stain on the ceiling from when the roof leaked 15 years ago, the framed family pictures lining the hallway. They were supposed to represent a story of love and endurance, but that morning they felt like props in a play I no longer understood. Around 10 o'clock, I heard the low hum of an engine in the driveway. Curious, I stepped to the window and saw Claire's sleek silver sedan pulling up. She got out gracefully, dressed simply in jeans and a cream-colored blouse, but she had that effortless air that made people stop and take notice. Her hair fell perfectly over her shoulders, and even from a distance I could see the smile she wore. But it wasn't the smile of a nervous bride-to-be. It was confident, assured, like someone stepping into familiar territory. I frowned. She wasn't supposed to be here until later. Daniel was still out walking. Emily was upstairs. I moved quietly through the house, every step careful, my heartbeat drumming louder with each passing second. Something in me already knew I shouldn't like what I was about to see. I stopped just short of the living room and stayed hidden by the doorway. Through the narrow gap I saw Emily greeting Claire. The two women stood close, too close, their voices low but charged with a familiarity that unsettled me. Emily touched Claire's arm lightly as she laughed at something Claire whispered. It wasn't the kind of laugh you give your future daughter-in-law. It was warmer, softer, almost intimate. My stomach tightened. They sat together on the couch. Emily poured her a glass of wine, though it was barely mid-morning. Claire accepted it with a smile, her hand brushing against Emily's in a way that made the air in the room feel electric. I wanted to tell myself, it was nothing, that I was misinterpreting, that stress was making me see shadows where there were none. But then Emily leaned in, whispering something against Claire's ear, and Claire tilted her head back, laughing, her hand resting casually on Emily's knee. My vision blurred. That was not how a woman should look at her future mother-in-law, and it was not how a wife should look at another woman, certainly not her son's bride-to-be. I took a step back, pressing my back against the wall to steady myself. The muggy air of the house suddenly felt suffocating, as though the walls were closing in on me. After a few minutes, I forced myself upstairs, trying to gather my thoughts. In our bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, gripping my knees. My mind raced, memories flashing like lightning. The late-night phone calls Emily used to brush off as work, the sudden shopping trips with vague explanations, the way she lit up whenever Claire's name was mentioned. I had chalked it up to excitement about the wedding, to the bond between women. But now, it all painted a different picture. I didn't want to believe it. God, I prayed I was wrong. But I wasn't the only one who had noticed. Daniel came back from his walk not long after. His shoulders slumped, his face pale. He looked like a man carrying a weight too heavy for his age. When our eyes met, I saw in his expression the silent confirmation of everything I feared. "Dad," he said quietly, "I think Mom's hiding something from us. From me." I swallowed hard. My throat was dry. "What makes you say that?" His jaw tightened. "I've seen them together. Not just talking, it's more. The way she touches her, the way Claire looks at her. It's not how people should act if this wedding is real." Hearing my son say it out loud was worse than discovering it myself. It was the shattering of a bond I had spent my whole life trying to protect the trust between a boy and his parents. I wanted to shield him, to tell him he was mistaken, that the world wasn't that cruel. But I couldn't lie to him, not when I had seen it with my own eyes. "Daniel," I said slowly, my voice heavy with grief, "sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us the deepest." He stared at me, searching my face for something, hope, denial, anything. But all he found was the truth I could no longer hide. His lips trembled, his voice breaking. "Then what am I supposed to do, Dad? Marry someone who's already in love with someone else? With Mom?" The words felt like knives twisting into my chest. No father should hear his son say that. No man should carry that kind of betrayal. I reached for his shoulder, gripping it firmly. "You don't have to do anything yet. We'll figure this out. But you're not alone in this, son. Not now, not ever." He nodded, though his eyes brimmed with tears. For a moment, he was that little boy again, the one who used to climb onto my shoulders and believe I could carry the weight of the world for him. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I had to. Because this wasn't just his heartbreak, it was mine too. That afternoon, the house filled with relatives, caterers, and the chaotic buzz of last-minute wedding preparations. Laughter and chatter floated through the air, masking the storm building quietly in our family. Emily played her role flawlessly, smiling, hugging guests, giving instructions. Claire moved effortlessly among them, radiant and charming. To everyone else, it was a perfect day in the making. But beneath the surface, my son and I knew the truth. We were living inside a lie that was seconds away from collapsing. I watched them both carefully, memorizing every glance, every lingering touch between Emily and Claire. The evidence was stacking higher and higher in my mind, undeniable and crushing. By the time evening drew near, I was no longer the man I had been that morning. The ground beneath me had shifted, and I knew our lives would never be the same again. And yet, the worst was still to come. The noise of the house that afternoon was almost unbearable. Laughter, the clinking of glasses, music drifting in from the backyard. It all sounded hollow to me, like echoes in a cavern. Everyone around me seemed wrapped up in joy and celebration, but all I could hear was the steady pounding of my own heart and the heavy silence between my son and me. Daniel stayed close to me, though he didn't say much. I could see the storm in his eyes. He tried to smile when relatives hugged him or when old friends clapped him on the back, but it was brittle. the kind of smile that doesn't reach the soul. More than once, I caught him glancing at Claire, then at his mother, and each time I could see his jaw tighten. He was hanging by a thread. I kept telling myself, hold it together. Don't make a scene. Not yet. But inside, every fiber of me wanted to grab Emily by the shoulders, demand the truth, scream at her for tearing our family apart. I wanted to drag Claire out of the house and ask her how she could stand there in white lace, pretending to promise forever to my son, while giving her heart to my wife. But I didn't. Not yet, because I knew Daniel needed me to be steady. If I exploded, if I gave in to the fire burning in my chest, it would all collapse too soon. Later that evening, when the house quieted down a little, Daniel came to find me. We slipped away to the garage, the only place where we could speak without fear of curious ears. The smell of motor oil and old wood filled the air. It was a place of comfort for me, filled with memories of Saturday afternoons, fixing Daniel's first car together, our laughter echoing off the concrete. But that night, it felt different. It felt like a war room. "Dad," Daniel said, his voice low, "I can't do this. I can't marry her." His words hung heavy in the air. I nodded slowly, trying to keep my voice calm. "Then you won't. No one can force you to go through with this." He ran his hands through his hair, pacing back and forth. "It's not just that. It's Mom. She's in this with Claire. I've seen enough. I know what's going on." Hearing him say it aloud shattered something in me. It wasn't just my suspicion anymore. It was reality. I leaned against the workbench, staring at the floor. "I saw them too," I admitted quietly. "This morning." "Oh." Daniel froze, his eyes snapping to mine. "You did?" I nodded again, the weight of the truth pressing down on me. The way she touched her, the way Claire looked at her. It wasn't just my imagination. I know what I saw. For a long moment, silence filled the garage. Only the faint buzz of the overhead light and the distant hum of the refrigerator broke it. Finally, Daniel's voice cracked. "How could she do this to me, to us? You've been married for over 20 years. Doesn't that mean anything?" I felt the sting of his words like a blade. Over 20 years. 26 to be exact. 26 years of love, of raising a son, of building a life. 26 years of promises that suddenly felt like dust slipping through my hands. "Sometimes," I said slowly, "people we think we know best are the ones who carry the deepest secrets." Daniel's fists clenched at his sides. "So what do we do, Dad? Do we just let them stand there tomorrow and lie in front of everyone? Pretend this wedding means something?" I shook my head. "No, we don't pretend. Not anymore." He stared at me, a flicker of determination breaking through his despair. "Then we stop it." The words were like a spark in a dark room. For the first time that day, I saw a glimpse of my son's strength, the same strength I had tried to teach him all his life. He wasn't going to be a victim. Neither of us was. We sat in that garage for nearly an hour, talking in hushed voices, piecing together a plan. Not a plan for revenge, not yet, but for survival. For truth. Daniel wanted to confront them immediately, to tear off the mask and watch their lies crumble. But I knew the timing had to be right. If we confronted them in private, they could twist the story, deny everything, make us look like the villains. "No," I told him firmly. "If we do this, we do it in the open, where there's no hiding, no excuses, no way out." He hesitated, then nodded. "Okay. But Dad, what if it destroys everything?" I met his eyes, my chest heavy with both grief and resolve. "Son, everything's already been destroyed. Now we just make sure the truth comes out with it." We didn't realize Emily had been standing just outside the garage door. I heard the faintest creak, the sound of someone shifting their weight. Instinct kicked in. I moved quickly, yanking open the door. There she was, her face pale, her eyes wide. She had heard enough. "Emily," I said, my voice low and trembling with anger, "how long have you been standing there?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again, her lips pressed together, her chest rising and falling as though she was struggling to breathe. "Don't lie to me," I snapped. "How long?" "Long enough," she whispered. Daniel stepped forward, his face twisted with pain. So, it's true? You and Claire? Emily's eyes flickered, and for the first time in decades of knowing her, I saw fear. Not the kind of fear you feel when you're in danger, but the fear of being exposed, of losing the control you thought you had. Daniel, honey, she began. Don't call me that, he cut her off, his voice breaking. Don't you dare. Her hand trembled at her side. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, he exploded. You betrayed Dad. You betrayed me. You ruined everything. The sound of his voice, raw and broken, tore through the garage like a storm. Emily flinched, her composure crumbling. Daniel, she pleaded, I never meant to hurt you. I couldn't listen anymore. My anger boiled over, years of love and loyalty twisting into something sharp and bitter. You didn't just hurt him, I said, my voice like steel. You destroyed this family. You took everything we built and set it on fire. For what? For her? Emily's eyes glistened with tears, but I didn't see remorse. I saw desperation. You don't understand, she whispered. It just happened. I didn't plan it. I shook my head, my jaw tight. You don't just happen to betray your husband and your son. You made choices, Emily. Choices that led us here. The silence that followed was suffocating. Daniel stood frozen, his hands shaking. Emily's tears spilled freely now, streaking down her face. And me, I felt hollow, as though the man I had been for 26 years had died right there in that garage. Finally, Daniel turned away. I can't look at you, he said, his voice breaking. He pushed past her, storming out into the night. Emily reached after him, but I caught her wrist. My grip was firm, not violent, but final. Don't, I said quietly. Just don't. She stared at me, her lips trembling, then pulled her hand back as though my touch burned her. For the first time since I had known her, she had nothing left to say. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Emily slept beside me, though I couldn't understand how she managed it. My mind replayed every moment of our marriage, every laugh, every kiss, every promise. All of it tainted now, poisoned by betrayal. By dawn, one truth had settled deep in my bones. The man I had been, the husband, the provider, the believer in our family, was gone. In his place was someone harder, someone who would no longer be deceived. The foundation of my life had cracked wide open, and tomorrow, in front of everyone, it would shatter completely. The morning of the wedding broke with a sky too bright for the darkness that lived inside me. The sunlight poured across the lawn we had manicured for weeks, lighting up the white chairs and the arch draped in roses. Everything looked picture perfect, like a scene out of a glossy magazine. To the guests arriving, it was a celebration. To me, it was the stage for the greatest betrayal I had ever known. I stood at the edge of the yard, hands in my pockets, pretending to survey the setup. In reality, I was trying to steady my breathing. Daniel was inside, getting dressed with his groomsmen. Emily was moving through the crowd like the perfect hostess, greeting guests with hugs and laughter that sounded hollow to my ears. And Claire, she was radiant, floating among friends and relatives, every inch the blushing bride-to-be. If you didn't know the truth, you'd believe you were witnessing a fairy tale. But I knew better. My son knew better. And that knowledge turned every smile, every handshake, every toast into a knife twisting deeper. By noon, the house buzzed with chaotic energy. Guests filled the backyard, sipping champagne, taking photos. The string quartet tuned their instruments. Caterers laid out trays of appetizers. From the outside, it was flawless. On the inside, I was unraveling. Daniel found me in the hallway just before the ceremony. He looked sharp in his black suit, but his eyes betrayed him. There was no joy, no nervous excitement, only resolve. "Dad," he said quietly, "are we still doing this?" I looked him straight in the eye. "We don't back down now, not after everything. Today the truth comes out." He nodded, his jaw tight. "Okay, then let's finish it." End of We had rehearsed it the night before, sitting in the garage with hushed voices and clenched fists. The plan wasn't complicated. It didn't need to be. The truth was powerful enough on its own. All we had to do was reveal it at the right moment. The guests began to take their seats as the ceremony drew near. The music swelled, soft and romantic. I sat in the front row, my hands gripping the arms of the chair. Emily sat beside me, her perfume thick in the air. She reached for my hand, smiling as though nothing was wrong. I let her fingers touch mine, but inside I felt only cold emptiness. Then the music shifted. The crowd turned. Claire appeared at the end of the aisle, breathtaking in her gown. Gasps of admiration rippled through the audience. She looked like a vision of purity, a bride ready to pledge her life to the man waiting at the altar. But I knew those vows were lies. As she walked down the aisle, her eyes flickered not to Daniel, but to Emily. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. A look of shared secrets, of triumph, as though this day was theirs, not his. My stomach turned. Daniel stood at the altar, his expression unreadable. He took her hand when she reached him, but his grip was stiff, his jaw set like stone. I saw the muscle in his cheek twitch, a small crack in his otherwise controlled mask. The minister began to speak, his voice carrying over the crowd. Words about love, faithfulness, commitment, words that rang like cruel jokes in my ears. Each phrase was a mockery, a reminder of what was already broken. I glanced around at the faces of our friends and family. They were smiling, teary-eyed, moved by the beauty of the moment. None of them knew they were watching a tragedy disguised as a wedding. Then came the vows. Claire recited hers with practiced grace, her voice steady and smooth. She promised loyalty, devotion, forever. Every syllable felt like poison dripping into my ears. Daniel repeated his voice strong, though I knew inside he was breaking. And then, at last, came the question. If anyone here has any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. The air stilled. The string quartet fell silent. For a heartbeat, there was only the sound of birds in the trees, the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. And then I stood. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Hundreds of eyes turned toward me. Emily's hand shot out, gripping my arm. "Richard," she hissed under her breath, "sit down." But I didn't. I looked at my son, standing tall at the altar. He gave me the smallest nod, barely visible. And in that moment, I knew we were in this together. I turned to the minister, my voice steady though my chest burned. "I have a reason," I said. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Guests leaned forward, their faces filled with confusion and shock. Claire's smile faltered, her eyes darting nervously. Emily went rigid beside me, her nails digging into my arm. "What are you doing?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I shook her hand off like it was a snake. "Telling the truth." The minister looked stunned. "Sir, what do you mean?" I drew a breath, every muscle in my body taut. "This marriage is a lie. The woman standing at that altar has been deceiving my son, and she hasn't been doing it alone." Gasps erupted. Heads turned toward Claire, then to Emily. My wife's face drained of color, her lips parting, but no words coming out. Daniel stepped forward, his voice breaking through the chaos. "It's true," he said loudly. "They've been together. My fiancée and my own mother." Then through of. The crowd exploded, shouts, gasps, murmurs swirling like a storm. Claire's face turned ghost white. Emily rose to her feet, tears springing to her eyes, but Daniel's voice cut through again, strong and unyielding. "You think I didn't know?" he spat, his voice trembling with fury. "I've seen you, both of you. And today you wanted me to stand here and marry her anyway, to stand in front of everyone we know and pretend. Well, I won't." End 5. He tore the ring from his pocket and hurled it to the ground. The sound of it hitting the wooden floor echoed like a gunshot. Claire stumbled, her mouth opening and closing as though searching for words. "Daniel, Don't," he snapped. "Don't you dare say you love me, because you don't." Emily's sobs broke through then, loud and desperate. She reached for him, but he recoiled, his face twisted with pain. "You were supposed to protect me," he said, his voice breaking. "You were supposed to be my mother, and instead, you destroyed me." Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. All around us, guests stared in horror, some whispering, others simply frozen. I looked at Emily, the woman I had shared more than half my life with, and in that moment, I didn't see my wife. I saw a stranger who had torn apart the family we built, the trust we gave, the love we poured into her. I turned to the crowd, my voice steady. "This wedding is over, Ian." And with those words, the life we once knew crumbled into ash. The silence that followed my words was so complete I could hear the leaves rustling in the trees. For a single, surreal moment, time seemed frozen. Then, like a dam breaking, the crowd erupted. Gasps, shouts, chairs scraping against the grass as people stood to get a better view. The sound of dozens of voices colliding at once created a chaos I will never forget. Claire swayed on her feet, her face drained of color beneath the lace veil. Her hands trembled as she tried to steady herself. "Daniel, it's not," she began, but her voice cracked under the weight of her own lie. "Don't," my son said, his voice raw. He didn't shout, but it cut through the noise like a blade. "Don't you dare try to spin this now." Emily's sobs filled the air. She had sunk back into a chair, her head in her hands, mascara streaking down her cheeks. To anyone who didn't know, it might have looked like grief. But to me, to Daniel, it was guilt, plain and raw. The minister looked utterly bewildered, his Bible clutched in his hands like a useless shield. The string quartet sat frozen, instruments silent in their laps. Guests turned in every direction, whispers turning into sharp accusations. I knew something was off, an aunt muttered somewhere behind me. "Her own son's fiancée? God Almighty," another voice said. Claire's parents rose from the second row, their faces masks of shock and humiliation. Her mother pressed a hand to her chest, as though she might faint. Her father, a man known for his stern composure, looked like someone had just struck him with a hammer. "Claire," he demanded, his voice booming, "tell me this isn't true." But Claire couldn't speak. Her lips trembled, her eyes darting between Emily and Daniel, searching for an escape. There was none. Daniel stepped back from the altar, his shoulders squared despite the tears burning in his eyes. "I won't be part of this lie," he said. His voice cracked, but he stood tall. "This wedding is over." The words landed with finality. No one could argue. No one dared. Emily tried to rise then, her hand reaching toward him. "Daniel, please." He spun on her, his pain boiling over. "Please what? Please forgive you. Please forget that you betrayed Dad, that you betrayed me." His voice rose, ragged with anguish. "You weren't just my mother. You were supposed to be the example of what love is supposed to look like, and instead you showed me this." Emily collapsed back into her chair, her sobs racking her shoulders. The picture of a woman undone, though I couldn't summon pity. Not anymore. I rose slowly, my legs heavy but steady. I looked out at the sea of faces, friends, family, neighbors all staring at me, waiting for what I would say next. "My son deserves better than lies," I said, my voice carrying over the chaos. "He deserves truth, and today you've all seen it for yourselves. There's no hiding it now. No more pretending." The crowd quieted slightly, the weight of my words sinking in. Some shook their heads, others whispered, but none could deny what they had witnessed. Claire tore the veil from her head and stumbled down the aisle, her gown dragging in the grass. Her mother followed after her, calling her name, but Claire didn't look back. Her father stayed frozen, his jaw tight, eyes blazing with humiliation. Emily rose again, her face streaked with tears, her hands trembling. She turned to me, then to Daniel. "I'm sorry," she whispered hoarsely. "I never meant for it to go this far. I never wanted—" Daniel cut her off, his voice sharp and cold. "You never wanted us to find out. That's all you mean. Don't dress it up like something noble." The words hit her like a physical blow. She staggered, her body folding in on itself. I felt nothing, no rage, no sorrow, just emptiness. 26 years of marriage had drained out of me, leaving only a hollow shell. The minister cleared his throat awkwardly. Perhaps we should adjourn, but the wedding was already over. Everyone knew it. Daniel walked down from the altar, his head high despite the tears that clung to his lashes. When he reached me, I put a steady hand on his shoulder. He looked at me, his lips trembling, and for a moment I saw the little boy who used to climb into my lap after nightmares. "It's over, Dad," he said quietly. "It's finally over." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Together, we walked out of the yard, through the stunned crowd, and into the house. We left Emily sitting among the ruins of her choices, her sobs echoing across the lawn. Inside, the silence was deafening. Daniel sank into a chair at the kitchen table, burying his face in his hands. I stood at the window, watching as guests began to scatter, murmuring in tight circles, phones already buzzing with the news that would spread like wildfire. The perfect wedding had turned into a public disaster, and I couldn't bring myself to regret it. For hours afterward, the house was a blur of movement. Guests collected their things, caterers packed up uneaten food, relatives offered clumsy words of sympathy. No one knew what to say that could make sense of what had just happened. Some avoided us entirely, their eyes downcast as though betrayal might be contagious. By evening, the backyard was empty. The flowers still stood, the arch still glistened with lights, but it was all meaningless now. A stage with no story, a celebration turned into a graveyard. Daniel remained at the table, silent. I wanted to tell him it would be okay, but I couldn't lie to him. Not anymore. Instead, I sat across from him, waiting until he finally looked up. "What do we do now, Dad?" he asked softly. I swallowed hard. "We survive, one day at a time." He nodded slowly, his eyes heavy but resolute. For the first time in days, I saw a flicker of strength return to him. That night, Emily tried to come into our bedroom. She stood in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying. "Richard," she whispered, "please, let's talk." I looked at her for a long time, the woman I had once loved more than anything, but all I saw was the ruin of what we'd had. "There's nothing left to say," I told her. My voice was calm, steady, final. She broke then, sobbing quietly, before retreating down the hall. I listened to her footsteps fade, the sound of a door closing. Alone in that bed, I realized something. Betrayal doesn't just end a marriage, it ends the man you were inside it. The husband I had been was gone. In his place stood someone harder, sharper, a man who had nothing left to lose. And maybe I thought that was the beginning of something new. The days after the wedding felt like stepping into a different world. Nothing looked the same, nothing sounded the same. Even the air inside the house carried a different weight, thick with the echo of betrayal. It was as though the walls themselves remembered what had happened. I couldn't walk down the hallway without imagining the shocked faces of our guests, or sit in the living room without hearing Daniel's voice crack as he confronted his mother. The lawn had been cleaned, the flowers thrown away, the chairs returned to the rental company, but none of that mattered. The damage was deeper than any decoration. It wasn't just the wedding that had been destroyed, it was the family that was supposed to be celebrating it. Word spread fast. By Monday morning, people in town already knew. At the grocery store, I caught snippets of conversations. At the gas station, a clerk who had known me for 20 years avoided eye contact. The whispers followed me everywhere. "Did you hear what happened at the Thompson wedding? The mother, with her son's fiancée. Done." I had lived my entire life in this community. I had built houses here, coached Little League, attended every church picnic, every 4th of July parade. And in just one afternoon, all of that history was overshadowed by a scandal I hadn't caused, but would never escape. Daniel bore the brunt of it even worse. He couldn't step outside without feeling eyes on him. Friends tried to reach out, but most didn't know what to say. Some pulled away entirely, too uncomfortable to stand by him. At night, I heard him pacing his room, restless, unable to sleep. One evening, I found him in the garage, sitting in silence beside the old Chevy we had rebuilt together when he was 16. The hood was propped open, though he hadn't been working on it. He was just sitting there, staring at the engine, like it might give him answers. "I don't know how to move forward, Dad," he admitted softly. His voice was heavy, broken. "I feel like everything in my life has been a lie. Claire, Mom, everyone was smiling at me, telling me I was the luckiest man alive, and the whole time they were—" He choked on the words. I sat beside him on the cold concrete floor. "It wasn't all a lie, son. You've still got the truth now. You know who loves you and who doesn't. That counts for something." He shook his head. "It doesn't feel like enough." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "You know what we always said when we rebuilt this car? That broken things can run again if you put in the work. This is no different. You're broken now, yeah, but it doesn't mean you're ruined. You'll run again. I promise." He didn't answer right away, but after a long pause, he gave a slow nod. That was enough for me. Meanwhile, Emily tried to reach out. She called, she texted, she even showed up at the house once, standing in the driveway like a ghost of the woman I used to know. Her eyes were red, her hair unkempt. She begged me to listen. "Richard, please," she cried. "You have to let me explain." I looked at her through the screen door, my jaw tight. "Explain what? How you betrayed our son? How you lied to me for years? What words could possibly make that right?" Tears streamed down her face. "I never meant for it to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." I shook my head. "You didn't accidentally fall into an affair with our son's fiancée. You made choices, Emily. Every look, every touch, every lie, that was a choice, and now you live with it." I shut the door, leaving her standing there in the fading light. Within weeks, I filed for divorce. The process was quick and merciless. With Daniel as my witness and the truth laid bare, she had no ground to fight. The judge awarded me the house and a fair share of our assets. Emily moved into a small apartment across town. From what I heard, she rarely showed her face in public. At church, she sat alone in the back row, people whispering as she walked past. The proud woman who once thrived in the spotlight of our community was now a pariah. Claire's fall was just as harsh. Her parents, humiliated beyond repair, cut her off financially. Her father, a man known for his strict moral code, couldn't bear to look at her. She lost her job at the design firm downtown, the scandal too heavy for her employers to overlook. Some said she left town, trying to start over in another state. I didn't care. She had made her choices, and now she was gone from our lives for good. Daniel struggled, but I insisted he go to therapy. At first, he resisted. "I don't want to sit in some room and talk about my pain," he said bitterly. But I pushed, reminding him that strength doesn't always mean holding everything inside. Slowly, session by session, he began to change. He started sleeping again. He spoke more freely. One day, he told me he was enrolling back at the community college to finish his degree in education. "I want to help kids, Dad," he said quietly. "I want to give them something steady to believe in, something I didn't have." I felt pride swell in my chest. He was rebuilding himself, piece by piece. As for me, I poured myself into my construction company. There was something healing about the rhythm of work, measuring, cutting, hammering, raising walls from nothing. It was honest work, solid. Every nail driven felt like reclaiming a part of myself. I wasn't just building houses anymore. I was building a future for me and my son. Months passed. The whispers quieted. The scandal faded, replaced by newer gossip. People moved on, as they always do. But inside me, the scars remained. One evening, nearly a year later, Daniel joined me on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of gold and purple. He sat beside me, quiet for a long time before finally speaking. "Dad," he said softly, "I want you to know, I'm okay. I never thought I'd get here, but I am. And it's because of you." I turned to him, my throat tight. No, son. It's because of you. You fought your way through the fire and came out the other side. I just walked with you. He smiled faintly. Maybe. But you didn't let me drown. That means more than you know. We sat in silence, the cool evening air wrapping around us. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace. The family we once had was gone. Emily lived in her small apartment. Her name, a whisper people spoke with pity. Claire disappeared into the shadows she had made for herself. But Daniel and I, somehow, we survived. We didn't just survive, we rebuilt. And in that rebuilding, I found something unexpected. Not the life I had planned, not the family I thought I'd have, but something raw and honest, something real. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. When I look back now, it still feels surreal. A year ago, I was a husband and a father preparing to watch his only son get married. Today, I am a divorced man in his mid-50s, still learning how to live again. But here's the truth. Life doesn't end when people betray you. It changes. Yes, it breaks, it burns, but from those ashes, something new can rise. I used to think strength was about holding everything together, never letting anyone see you fall. But I've learned that real strength is admitting when you're broken and choosing to stand up anyway. Watching my son go through heartbreak, watching him rebuild his life taught me that. We don't heal in one big leap. We heal in small steps, day after day, even when we don't feel like we're moving forward. Emily and Claire made their choices, and they live with the consequences. I don't carry their shame anymore. That burden is theirs. What I carry now is something lighter, the knowledge that my son and I survived, and that survival turned into growth. To anyone listening who has been betrayed by a partner, by a friend, by family, let me tell you this. You are more than what was done to you. Your worth isn't defined by someone else's lies. You can rebuild. You can stand again. And when you do, you'll find a strength inside yourself that you never knew existed. I'm 54 years old, and I'm still learning. But every morning, when I pour coffee into that chipped mug my son painted for me in grade school, I remember why I keep going. Because broken things can run again. And so can broken people. Thank you for walking through this story with me. If it touched you, if it reminded you of your own strength, I hope you'll stay with me for more. Your support means more than you know.